President Trump ratcheting up his attacks against the Russia probe and special counsel Robert Mueller. Is this all setting up for the president to fire Mueller? And if he does, what happens next? Then the New Hampshire primary is nearly 2 years away, but there's already an unusual amount of activity going on up there. Are Republicans actually getting ready to try a primary challenge against the sitting president? Then Andrew Cuomo has himself a primary challenger. Actress and activist Cynthia Nixon is running for governor. We're going to look at the issues she cares about and whether she's got a shot. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. It was a wild weekend filled with threats, firings, and new information about the Russia probe, and things did not calm down today.
This morning, the president back on Twitter, a total witch hunt with massive conflicts of interest. While he doesn't specify the special counsel investigation, it follows a half dozen tweets this weekend. The White House tried to ease concerns last night, saying definitively the White House yet again confirms that the president is not considering or discussing the firing of the special counsel. But over the weekend, the president blasted sanctimonious James Comey and called out the special counsel by name for the first time, writing, "The Mueller probe should never have been started, in that there was no collusion and there was no crime."
But the entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion.
The Russia story is a total fabrication.
I call it the Russian hoax.
The Twitter rampage started after the late Friday night firing of former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, 2 days before he was set to retire, jeopardizing his 22-year pension. Writing, "It was a great day for democracy." McCabe denies any wrongdoing. Mr. Trump's personal lawyer then called for an end into Mueller's probe of possible Russian meddling in the 2016 election.
It's getting under his skin. The Mueller investigation should have nothing to do with the McCabe firing, but you see now the president trying to lump them together.
In Congress, both Republicans and Democrats urged caution.
That would be the beginning of the end of his presidency, because we're a rule of law nation.
This would undoubtedly result in a constitutional crisis.
Amid new calls for congressional protection of the special counsel.
And speaking of congressional protection, there are actually a couple of bills in Congress right now that would protect Mueller and his investigation, but both are stalled. One's a bipartisan Senate measure that says Mueller could only be removed for cause, like misconduct or conflict of interest. Another would require a federal judge to sign off and on any move to fire Mueller. And the plot thickens regarding Andrew McCabe. He was interviewed by Mueller's team and gave investigators personal memos of his interactions with the president calling them, quote, fake memos. All right, so let's get some analysis on all things Mueller. And for that, we turn to our panel. Joining us tonight, Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, also a senior advisor at the consulting firm Applied Techonomics. And you're looking at Giancarlo Parasuti, a former aide to President George H.W. Bush. Welcome, both of you. Thanks for being here. What do you think, Giancarlo, I'll start with you, is the end game for Trump ratcheting up his attacks on Mueller? Is he actually looking to position himself to fire Mueller, or is he softening the ground to try to activate his base so that any report that comes back from Mueller that's scathing or close to an indictment, he can say it's all politically motivated?
I'm not sure the president knows the answer to that. I think he's reacting viscerally, as he does too often with matters of public policy and matters of politics as well.
But then what changed? Because he hadn't been this direct in his attacks on Mueller until now.
Well, I think it was no secret of his disdain for the overall process. We heard a lot about witch hunts. I think that now that things are ratcheting up, that you're potentially right, that it could be a way to soften the ground and to discredit whatever the ultimate conclusion is. Although it was reported today that it sounds like that the investigation is heading in a direction that is not centered around what happened before Donald Trump became president, but rather notions of obstruction of justice that obviously occurred once the investigation was underway. So I think either way, the president is going to, and I say this sadly, is going to be able to say that I was right and you were wrong, and this was a witch hunt.
The post-inauguration parts of the investigation are within the purview of Mueller. I mean, if there's obstruction, he's certainly allowed to investigate that.
But certainly, but this is playing out the way almost every Washington investigation in recent memory does, where a crime allegedly was committed, there is pursuit and investigation of that crime, and the only indictments that follow are not indictments for the crime that was set out to be investigated, but things that happened in the process along the way, the Scooter Libby tale, if you will. And that's the way it looks like this is headed, too, which ultimately will vindicate the president.
Jeannie, what's your sense? You think the president's looking for leverage to fire Mueller?
I think he's trying to play both ends. I mean, I think if he can get that leverage, he would like to do that. Otherwise, he would like to muddy the waters enough that anything that comes out of this investigation is immediately looked at as a partisan witch hunt, can't be believed, and not for nothing, but it also helps get out his base for 2018. So I think all of this works to the president's advantage as it pertains to protecting himself and it pertains to getting the base out. What it doesn't do is allow him to pursue his agenda in Congress and allow him to act as a president should. I mean, you look at what he did this weekend over the McCabe firing. He should have kept his mouth shut. He should have allowed the firing to go forward, because I think that we all have to say that if the IG and the other offices in the FBI recommended it, then it was within grounds until we see what that comes back with. But the president muddies the waters when he starts to tweet about it. And so he gets in his own way as it pertains to him pursuing his agenda.
So let's play out, and I want to shift back to Mueller. Let's play out, let's assume that Mueller comes back with something related to obstruction. We'll leave, collusion aside for now, or conspiracy aside for now. If that seems to be the direction that Mueller's going and Trump fires Mueller, what happens? Is there, and we'll talk about the efforts to try to protect Mueller at this point, but is there enough pushback on Capitol Hill right now?
I don't know that there's enough now. We saw inklings of it this weekend, but famously, except for Trey Gowdy, it happens to be most people who are not going to be in Washington come November, January of next year. And so I'm not sure there's enough pushback in the Republican Party. If the Democrats take the House and maybe the Senate, then the president has himself a real problem on his hands, which is why his entire focus needs to be on retaining the House and Senate. At least if I was advising him, that's what I would say.
I agree with Jeannie on that last point for sure, but to go back to something that I said before, and I also agree that I think if in fact the obstruction charge is the charge that Mueller pursues, that emboldens Trump and that emboldens his allies in Congress, because Trump will be able to say, at the very beginning of this, people were saying that I was taking money from Russians and I was indebted financially to Russia. Then they were saying I worked with Russia to swing the election my way. When neither of those things were proven true, now they're going after a trumped up, pardon the expression, charge of obstruction of justice, only because they can't justify the first two things that they set out to prove. And I think that will embolden members of Congress.
You're saying that's the argument that he would make.
That's it. Sorry. No. This is
enough.
not my opinion. This is the argument I believe he will make.
And notice in his tweets, it's always in capitals, no collusion. And he keeps coming back to that point over and over again because he wants to hammer home this should never have started because there was no collusion. Now that it started, to Giancarlo's point, this is what they're going to try to pin me.
Although to be fair, the jury is still out.
Yeah, he may
every possible way when it comes to collusion or conspiracy related to Russia. What about these actions to try to protect Mueller? And it doesn't seem like Congress really has much motivation to do it right now. We're hearing from a lot of Republicans, well, I don't think he's going to fire Mueller, so I don't think there's any need to codify protections of Mueller. Should Congress be doing that, Giancarlo? And can that be a campaign issue for, let's say, the 6 Republican members from our region?
I am deeply uncomfortable anytime Congress or politics enters into the adjudication or of justice or the seeing through of any investigation.
But can justice be done without that protection from Mueller? If he's afraid that he's going to get fired.
I don't think, first of all, I don't think Mueller's afraid that he's going to get fired. I think Mueller is going to do his job and he's going to report his findings. And if that results in his firing, I don't think this is something Robert Mueller's going to lose a lot of sleep over based on what I know of him. I think that it would create such, to quote Lindsey Graham, I don't know if he said a constitutional crisis, but he certainly implied it. And it will absolutely be the last straw for many in the GOP.
Jeannie, you've seen the numbers. The American public wants Mueller to be able to pursue his investigation unfettered, or with as little fettering as possible, if I can use the word fettering. Why isn't protecting Mueller a bigger issue, and particularly a campaign issue as we approach the midterms?
I think that people feel that it's not Congress's role. You look at the Constitution. If Congress wants to act, they have avenues available to them. Number one being impeachment. They're not ready to go there, I get that. But protecting a special counsel is not something that is traditionally within the purview of Congress, nor should it be, in my opinion. I think that he should do his job. I think if the Attorney General, or in this case the Deputy Attorney General, feels like he's not, he can be removed from that job. But I don't think Mueller has come anywhere close to that. And if the president pursues this firing, then Congress can take action, and I think that they will in that case.
Except that we've already seen the House Intelligence Committee basically close its doors and punt on their version of this investigation. There's still a couple that are going on in Congress. It seems a little like waiting until and I've always botched this expression, the cow has left the barn gate or door or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
I always thought it was a horse, but
okay, horse,
whatever.
barn, out, it's not there. You know what I'm saying. Like, it does seem like that would be a little too late if they wait until after Mueller is fired before they take action.
Well, it's not, because at their disposal is the important aspect of impeachment, which is the job of the House. Now, are they going to do that? I have no idea, and I don't think the Republican Congress will. But I think a Democratic Congress very well might. And I'm not in favor of this violation of separation of powers, them slipping into the judicial arena myself.
And look, if the House majority was in question, if the president fires Bob Mueller and the House Republicans don't do anything to remedy that, it is a virtual certainty that they will lose their majority come November. So either way, the president has a problem.
All right, we will switch gears in our next segment here on RFL. Up next, President Trump today outlining his plan to fight the opioid crisis. We'll explain why critics are saying it's doubling